All right, let's jump right in. Welcome, future CMAs, to today's explainer. We're tackling a super high-yield exam topic straight out of your study materials: how transforming data actually leads to quality decision-making. If you want to think like a modern management accountant, and trust me, you need to if you want to ace this section of the exam, you really need to understand how we move from raw numbers to actionable strategy.
Okay, so I need you to just burn this quote into your memory right now. The quality information should lead to quality decisions. It's basically the golden rule for this entire topic. The core concept you're going to be tested on is that with the help of well-curated and properly reported data, decision-makers should be able to add higher-value business insights. And those insights? They are exactly what leads to better, more strategic decision-making. It's not just about hoarding data. It's about what that data empowers you to do.
To make studying a breeze, we've organized your textbook's 8 core data analytics abilities into 3 simple buckets. So our agenda for this explainer is data for quality decisions, defining lean finance, strategy and predicting outcomes, managing risk and fraud, value, customers and dashboards, and finally, the CMA takeaway.
Section 1. Data for quality decisions. Let's anchor this to exactly what you're going to see on the exam.
This visual comes straight out of your study material, specifically focusing on how we transform information into a rock-solid process for quality decision-making. Your text lays out 8 specific abilities a firm unlocks when it nails this transformation. We're going to unpack every single one of those 8 abilities right now, so you are totally prepped for any multiple choice or essay question they throw at you.
Moving on to Section 2, Defining Lean Finance. Before we dive into those 8 abilities, we really need to master the operational framework that makes it all possible.
Listen up, future CMAs. This definition is crucial. The text clearly states that a judicious use of data analytics is absolutely essential for implementing lean finance. And what does that actually mean? Well, lean finance basically implies optimized finance processes. We're talking reduced costs paired with increased speed, flexibility, and quality. Think of lean finance as this high-performance engine, and data analytics, that's the premium fuel making it run smoothly. Without that data, you just can't get the speed and flexibility this framework demands.
Okay, Section 3, Strategy and Predicting Outcomes. Let's look at the first big bucket of abilities an organization gets from going lean. So the big shift here is all about how we view the future. Over on the left, you've got conventional forecasting techniques, relying mostly on historical financial reports. It's essentially driving your business while staring right into the rearview mirror. But on the right, thanks to modern data analytics, a firm gains the ability to logically understand a massive range of both structured and unstructured data. You take all that rich information and put it right to work for corporate planning, budgeting, forecasting, and serious decision support. By making this shift, we're completely elevating the role of the management accountant. We aren't just reporting yesterday's news anymore. We are actively and strategically predicting what's going to happen tomorrow. And this perfectly captures the first 3 of our 8 core abilities. Because you have this logical understanding of data, you can, number 1, predict outcomes way more effectively compared to those old conventional methods. Plus, it gives you the power to do real-time spotting of emerging opportunities and, just as importantly, real-time spotting of your own capability gaps. You're not sitting around waiting for month-end close to realize a market trend just blew right past you. You see the opportunity or the operational gap instantly.
Section 4. Managing Risk and Fraud. Now, this is a highly testable bucket for the exam. It's all about how data analytics protects the organization.
If you get a question on the exam about uncertain, catastrophic events, you absolutely need to know the data-driven solution here. The business world is completely unpredictable. Market volatility is just a given, and those rare, extreme black swan events, they can totally blindside an unprepared company.
So here are abilities 4 and 7 from your reading. Data analytics gives firms the incredible ability to create strategies for responding to those uncertain events through simulation. You can literally model out worst-case scenarios before they ever hit. At the same time, you gain the ability to pinpoint possible fraud possibilities, again, right on the basis of data analytics. You're using your data as a massive shield to proactively defend the firm's assets.
All right, Section 5, Value, Customers, and Dashboards. Let's dive into our final bucket, which connects data straight to the end user and the bottom line. Watch how this naturally builds on itself. First, you get the ability to diagnose, filter, and excerpt actual value from a sea of financial and operational info, all to make better business decisions. Next, by filtering out that value, you can recognize viable advantages to service your customers in a much better manner. You figure out what they actually need. And finally, you tie it all together by building impressive and useful dashboards. These dashboards measure and demonstrate success, which ultimately leads to highly effective strategies. Basically, you diagnose the value, deliver it to the customer, and then prove it all on a slick dashboard.
Section 6. The CMA Takeaway. So, we've covered lean finance and all 8 abilities. But to think like a true management accountant, we need to apply one last filter.
Even though data analytics and beautiful dashboards are amazing tools, your text reminds us that the ultimate goal is always higher value business insights. The data doesn't make the decision, you do. You are the human element that curates this information to guarantee better strategic decision-making. You never want to just blindly report data. You've got to transform it into actual business value. Never take an important analysis purely at face value.
I'll leave you with this provocative thought to ponder as you keep studying. We know the 8 abilities, you totally understand the power of lean finance, but when you're actually sitting in that managerial chair, how will you ensure you don't just blindly trust the machine? How will you apply professional skepticism to those powerful dashboards, using your CMA expertise to add those higher value insights and guarantee truly quality decisions?
It's the thing that bridges the gap between raw, cold numbers and actual human judgment. We're talking about professional skepticism regarding data. Look, as future management accountants, you're going to be absolutely bombarded with dashboards, complex metrics, and automated reports. But knowing how to interpret them, and honestly, more importantly, knowing exactly when to question them, is what's going to set you apart in your career and, for sure, on test day.
So, let's kick things off with a bit of a provocative question to challenge a super common assumption. Does more data automatically mean more truth? You know, in this era of big data, it is incredibly tempting to look at a massive, highly complex data set and just assume, well, it's math. It must represent objective, unquestionable facts. But as we'll see, the sheer volume of information can actually obscure the truth just as easily as it reveals it.
To get you totally exam ready, we've structured today's explainer into 3 quick phases: the concept, the challenge, and finally, the balance.
Okay, let's hit Section 1, the concept.
For your exam, you absolutely need this flashcard-ready definition locked in your memory. What does professional skepticism actually mean when you're a manager handling big data? Well, it means exploring the hidden insights beneath the surface of a dataset, and crucially, looking at surface-level appearances with a genuinely questioning mind. You see, you aren't just a passive consumer of data. You have to be an active interrogator of it. When the data says profits are up 20%, your first instinct shouldn't be to throw a party. Your first thought needs to be, okay, why, and is this actually accurate?
And you can see exactly where this concept lives right here in Section 8.6 of your curriculum. This anchors our whole discussion today. This isn't just some abstract theory, it's a fundamental pillar of how professional standard setters and regulators expect you to operate in the real world. It's heavily tested because it is literally central to the ethics and the day-to-day effectiveness of a finance professional.
The absolute crucial point here is this explicit warning. While data analytics are, of course, vital for decision-making, managers should never take an important analysis at face value. A beautifully designed, colorful chart can easily hide a fundamentally flawed premise. Your job is to peel back those layers and make sure the foundation of the analysis is rock solid before you go and base a $1 million decision on it.
Moving right along to Section 2, the challenge.
As a future CMA, you really have to recognize the double-edged sword of modern technology. Yes, new analytics tools allow for some incredibly unique insights into our financial environments, but they also create very unique challenges when you're trying to exercise that skepticism. Because there's this massive increase in the overall availability of information, the machine is just constantly hunting for anomalies. And what does that do? It forces you, the analyst, to manage and investigate a staggering number of red flags. Honestly, it can get overwhelming pretty quickly.
Which brings us to a major headache you'll almost certainly see on the test, the false positive. A false positive happens when your data tools flag something as a potential anomaly, maybe hinting at a major error or even fraud, but after you spend all this time and resources investigating it, it actually turns out to be a perfectly reasonable, totally explained variation in the data. Think of it as the digital equivalent of a car alarm going off just because a heavy truck drove by, not because someone was actually breaking in. Please drill this highly testable fact into your head.
The frequency of false positives increases proportionately with the size and complexity of your data. Let me say that one more time because it's vital. As your data gets bigger and more complex, which, let's face it, is happening at literally every company right now, your false positive rate is going to scale right alongside it. The more data points you're crunching, the higher the statistical probability that the machine will find something that looks weird, but is actually completely harmless.
And because of that sheer volume of false alarms, we run headfirst into what's known as the outlier problem. Studies explicitly show that analysts face severe problems determining true outliers using these tools. When you're dealing with 99 false positives for every one actual case of fraud or error, finding that true outlier is like finding a needle in a haystack, all while the machine is just constantly dumping more hay right on top of you. Which brings us to our final section, the balance.
So management is constantly facing two competing pressures here. On the left side, you've got the very real, tangible costs of skepticism. Constantly questioning the data and investigating every single false positive eats into your budget coverages, plus it strains client or departmental relationships. I mean, nobody likes an auditor or a manager who constantly suspects them of making mistakes, right? But then on the right side, look at the risks of underutilization. If you just back off and blindly trust the machine to save some money and keep people happy, you risk missing true devastating anomalies. Not to mention, you're completely wasting those expensive data capabilities your company just heavily invested in.
So the ultimate takeaway for your exam, and honestly for your future career, is this. Management has got to strike a delicate, fine balance. You have to thread the needle between the high cost of constant, relentless skepticism and the dangerous trap of underutilizing your data analytics. You need to maintain just enough skepticism to catch the real issues while designing processes that are efficient enough to keep your operational costs firmly under control.
I'm going to leave you with this provocative thought to chew on as you review your notes today. If data complexity mathematically guarantees more false positives, at what exact point does the cost of investigating all those false alarms actually outweigh the value of the data analytics themselves? How will you, as a strategic future manager, decide when to trust the machine and when to pull the trigger on a costly investigation? Keep that questioning mind sharp, guys.
And that is data ethics. We've organized this material into a highly structured, memorable format to really help you lock in these concepts. We're going to look at exactly how data analytics empowers businesses, but also we'll cover the strict moral boundaries that just have to be maintained to protect user rights.
Okay, let's dive into this. We all know that data analytics is an incredible tool, right? It helps guide the decision-making process and can literally make or break an organization's success. But, this massive empowerment for business also brings some pretty significant challenges along with it. So the big question we're answering today, and for sure the question you'll likely face on your exam, is how can business organizations ethically collect, store, and use data? What specific rights need to be upheld when we are handling sensitive, real-world information?
To answer that, well, we first need to formally define what we're actually talking about. Data ethics addresses the moral obligations of gathering, protecting, and using personally identifiable information. Now, if you're taking notes right now, absolutely circle that term, personally identifiable information, or PII. These days, managing PII is a major concern for analysts, managers, and data professionals. It is literally the core of data ethics.
So, here is the exact pillar structure we'll use today. 1. The Data Ethics Challenge. 2. Ownership and transparency. 3. Privacy and data security. 4. Intentions and outcomes. And 5, a quick final exam review. All right, Section 1, the Data Ethics Challenge.
While data analytics heavily drives the corporate decision-making process, it introduces a massive liability. We're no longer just looking at spreadsheets full of anonymous numbers. We are often looking at the granular behaviors and deeply sensitive details of real people. Analysts and managers have an absolute moral obligation to handle this data responsibly. Honestly, it's one of the most pressing modern challenges for data professionals, dodging those legal and ethical complications that pop up from mishandling information. To navigate this challenge, every business organization has to follow 5 basic principles of data ethics. Here's your high-level mental map: ownership, transparency, privacy, intention, and outcomes. If you can memorize these 5 pillars and really understand how they apply to real-world business scenarios, you're going to be in great shape for your exam.
Section 2. Ownership and transparency.
Let's move to our next concepts and see how this built. We're going to group our first 2 principles into what we can call the collection phase of data handling. The very first principle is ownership.
The golden rule here is that the ownership of any personal information belongs strictly to the person. It doesn't belong to the company that scraped it, and it definitely doesn't belong to the analyst organizing it. Because of this, collecting someone's personal data without their explicit consent is both unlawful and completely unethical. You simply can't take what isn't yours.
So how do we ethically operate? Well, we get consent. It's always advisable to ask for permission beforehand to avoid any future legal or ethical headaches. This is often done through digital privacy policies, signed agreements, or by just asking users to agree to terms and conditions. For all of you future financial professionals out there, this is incredibly important when dealing with financial data, which is obviously highly sensitive in nature. Prior permission absolutely must be obtained before using a client's financial data for any further analysis.
And that brings us to the second principle in our collection phase, transparency. It's not enough to just get consent, right? Maintaining transparency is critically important while gathering data. The exact objective with which the company is collecting the user's data must be explicitly known to the user. You can't just ask for data under the guise of one thing and then quietly use it for something else entirely.
To really see what acceptable transparency looks like, consider a company using cookies to track the online behavior of a user. Clear transparency means stating explicitly, through a written policy, that cookies will track behavior and the collected data will be stored securely to train an algorithm to enhance the user experience. Once the user actually reads that, they can decide to accept or reject it. Unclear transparency, on the other hand, which is highly unethical, would be hiding the real purpose of financial data collection. When gathering financial data from clients, you must clearly mention the exact purpose that data will be used for.
Section 3. Privacy and Data Security. Now, we transition from the collection phase into the storage and protection phase, which brings us to our third guiding principle. The concepts we're discussing are brilliantly laid out right in Section 8.7 of your text materials on the ethical use of data and information. Just because a user allows you to collect, store, and analyze their personally identifiable information, that absolutely does not imply it should be made publicly available.
For the exam, you really need to understand this vital distinction. For companies, it is mandatory to publish some financial information to the public, for example, through annual financial reports. That's expected and it's required. However, there's a massive amount of strictly confidential information, like PII. If this confidential data falls into the wrong hands, it can create enormous problems and devastating financial loss. Because the risk of financial loss is so incredibly high, an ethical business must have robust data security processes in place, like file encryption and dual authentication passwords. But, hey, pay close attention to this major risk. Your source material specifically warns that a breach of data privacy can even happen through de-identifying a dataset. Analysts must remain extremely vigilant, even when they think they've stripped all the personal markers from the data.
Section 4. Intentions and Outcomes.
We are now moving into the application phase of data analytics, where we'll cover our final two guiding principles. Principle 4 is all about intention. Look at this quote taken directly from the text. The intention of data analysis should never be making profits out of others' weaknesses or for hurting others. This is a definitive moral line in the sand. Furthermore, regarding intention, collecting data which is simply unnecessary for your specific analysis should always be avoided, because doing so is inherently unethical.
Our fifth and final principle is outcomes, and this introduces a highly testable vocabulary term for you: disparate impact. Disparate impact occurs when, even if a company's intentions are entirely good, the result of the data analysis inadvertently hurts the clients and data providers.
Now, what's really interesting here is how these two application principles contrast with each other. Principle 4, intention, is all about avoiding actively malicious behavior. You're choosing not to exploit weaknesses for profit. But Principle 5, outcomes, places a really heavy ethical burden on the analyst to prevent even accidental harm. Producing a disparate impact, even inadvertently, is still considered unethical. It requires data professionals to think several steps ahead about the real-world consequences of their analytics.
Section 5. Final Exam Review. Let's transition to a quick, punchy summary to wrap things up. We want to connect everything back to why you, as future CMA professionals, must prioritize this framework. So, the crucial point is that data empowerment requires data responsibility. Here are your 5 pillars for your final exam notes. 1. Ownership. Information belongs to the person. You must get consent. 2. Transparency. Always explicitly state your objective for gathering the data. 3. Privacy. Rigorously secure all PII to prevent financial loss. 4. Intention. Ensure your analysis does not exploit or hurt others. And 5. Outcomes.
Carefully analyze your results to avoid any inadvertent disparate impact.
I want to leave you with this provocative thought as you prepare for your exams and your future careers. As financial professionals and business leaders, you're going to be the ones at the helm of massive data operations. So, how will you personally ensure these moral obligations and data rights are upheld in your organization?